Good morning, ladies. Hope you've had a wonderful day so far and that you've been able to get some things accomplished. Hope you had a wonderful Lord's Day. We did. Thursday last week we ended our VBS. It was a wonderful week. Had good attendance. I think we had 6 saved. Two of those were teenage boys that came in on the last day, kind of unexpected from the neighborhood. So that was wonderful. Had a wonderful Lord's Day. Sunday. Every time we have a fifth Sunday on the calendar, we do a morning service, and then we gather together and everybody kind of brings their own lunch and they invite people to join them or whatever. Sometimes people will run and grab a bite to eat and come right back. But then we have an afternoon service that starts about 2 or 2:15, something like that. And usually that entails popcorn preaching from either young men or older men or whatever man wants to join in and do that. Our 10-year-old grandson preached on Sunday, so that was a joy to hear him. I think we have four guys that did the popcorn preaching on Sunday, so that's always a blessing to enjoy. But sometimes when we have that fifth Sunday, people will forget about it, and inevitably somebody will show up at 5 o'clock for church service. And so we were having our choir practice, and lo and behold, this couple walks in, and he looked familiar, but she did not. And so after choir practice was over, I came down and was just talking to them, and I was reminded of who the man was, but I hadn't met the lady. And so he introduced her as his fiance. And in my mind, typically when I meet somebody for the first time, I just try to get to know them, make a friend of them, and then if the Lord opens the door, I'll talk to them about the gospel. But it was very evident that the Holy Spirit was just pushing me to talk to this lady. And I knew that they had come for church service and they missed it. And so I didn't beat around the bush at all. And this is unlike me. I mean, I don't typically beat around the bush about stuff, but it was unlike me to like just go bam right straight into it. But asked her who she was, a little bit about her, if she was from the area. And then I just asked her, do you know the Lord is your Savior? I mean, they were there for church and they missed it. And then she proceeded to tell me, I've been baptized 3 times. She started telling me a little bit about her life. And I could tell that she was troubled, and then she mentioned that she'd been a part of the Wiccan movement. And so I thought, oh my goodness, she needs the Lord. And so I said, can we just go talk for a little bit? Would you come back to my office and we could sit down and just talk for a little bit? And we went back there, and it was just minutes, and I started sharing the gospel with her, and the tears began to roll. And she was just so ready to be saved. And she did. She ended up trusting Christ as her Savior that afternoon after everybody had already gone home. So I had the blessed privilege of leading somebody to the Lord on Sunday, and I always love that, showing somebody the way. But I hope you'll take a minute, if we have not met yet, to introduce yourself down in the description box, and my email will be down there. And so if you would like the study notes to the Bible study, send me an email. One of you asked last week about study notes, but I haven't gotten your email yet, so I can't send the notes until I get that. But I hope you'll take a minute to make a comment. I know a lot of you just listen. Your lives are busy. My life is busy. And I don't need, I don't need the thumbs up. I don't need affirmation from people, as long as I just try to live my life and please the Lord. So thumbs up, that doesn't concern me. But I wish you'd leave a comment and just say, hey, I was here, whatever, that would help me to know who's following along. And, I don't know. I just need that interaction sometimes. But we are going to finish up with the second half of our lesson on Esther today. And we left off with number 7, and today we're going to pick it up with number 8, and we'll get right back into this. And so number 8 says, what benefits came out of her victory? Her life and the life of her people, the Jews, were all saved. So that's a wonderful benefit, right? The Jews who before were under a dark cloud, they were rejected, disgraced. Now they had light and gladness, joy and honor. And many of the people of the land became Jews. They renounced idolatry and worshiped the true God. And we see that in chapter 9, verses 27 and 28. And those verses say, the Jews ordained and took upon them and upon their seed and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing and according to their appointed time every year, and that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. And so you have no idea, I have no idea of the testimony that we display to others when we walk through God, when we walk with God through difficult circumstances. We have no idea who's watching us while we're going through that trial. And it's hard to contemplate that because we're so consumed with the situation itself. But always remember that people do watch, and they're going to take an example from our life, whether it's what to do or what not to do. And I don't know about you, but I really want people to look at my life and see some things that they can copy. I want to be a help to people, not a hindrance. Number 9 says, how did her temperance, meaning Esther, how did her temperance or her self-control help others? And so it was an example of others, what the Lord can do through someone who's fully surrendered to him. They got to see that. The lives of the Jewish people were saved because of her self-control. There were a lot of areas where she exercised temperance, self-control through this whole situation. It also exemplified God's power to them. Like I mentioned, we forget that others are watching to see how we respond to the Lord in our trials, not react, but respond. And so think of all the situations that happen in our life on a daily basis, and I may hit yours, I may not. But think about when the car breaks down for the umpteenth time. Not just once, but this has happened several times before. And it like breaks you. It's like a straw that broke the camel's back. And so rather than responding to that thing, your child sees you get out of the car, lose your temper, kick the tire, maybe, lose your composure. But how many times do we say to our children, control yourself? When they're having a fit or a meltdown or whatever, but then we fail to do that in our own life when things go wrong. And if anybody's watching, it's our children and our grandchildren, right? And man, if anybody that I want to influence for right, it's them, my children and my grandchildren. Think about when things go wrong at work. Maybe you have a coworker that's constantly losing their temper. They're constantly negative. But when things go wrong at work, do your coworkers see you getting upset, getting negative? Maybe they hear you complaining. Maybe you're dragging the boss's name through the mud. I hope not. That's not the kind of thing that a believer does, but maybe your coworker sees you doing that kind of thing. What about when trials happen at home? Does your spouse see you go to the Lord with that thing? Does he see you praying about it, talking to the Lord, giving it to him, just letting it go? Or does he see you get impatient or angry, maybe negative and ready to point fingers, ready to fight at the drop of a hat because this thing has happened in your life? Temperance in the life of a believer is so important. Self-control. And it's easy for us to tell somebody else, you need to control yourself. But it's an easy thing to excuse in our own life, isn't it? It's an easy thing to point out in someone else's life, but it's a hard thing to control in our own life. But without it, we lack a testimony. We do, because what you do speaks so loudly that people can't hear what you're saying. So you really need to exercise self-control and follow Esther's example. And even after all of these years, her example of self-control speaks to us and helps us as believers. Number 10 says, Titus 2 used the example of refusing wine when setting forth temperance, but there are other areas in our life where we need to exemplify self-control. And the question here says, what are some other areas in a woman's life where we could be entangled? And this is where I would like to get some feedback from you to see what you got. The first one that popped into my brain was friends, because the first half of our ministry was spent doing youth ministry, and so I realized the importance of a good friend. And so friends would be a big one, and I always think of that verse, iron sharpeneth iron. So a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend, or something. I didn't write it down, but that's an important thing in our life, is right friends. The temptation can be strong to pal around with lost friends from work, and always remember that you're there to win them to the Lord. That's why God put you there. He strategically placed you in that job that you have to win people to Christ. Maybe you're the only person that will have an opportunity to give them the gospel. That's why you're there. Don't forget that. You're not there to make friends of them. I mean, you will naturally become friends with them because you work with them several hours a day, but you're there to give them the gospel. Don't ever forget that. You see them several hours a day, every day, and you probably know more about them than you do some of your own church family, honestly, because you spend so much time with them. But that's an unequal yoke. Always remember that. The Bible says we're not to be unequally yoked, and that's not just in the marriage situation, but in all areas of life. You have to be careful about that. And if you find that all of a sudden you have more in common with your lost friends than you do with other believers, then you're on dangerous ground and you need to do some self-examination and find out why that is. The Bible encourages us to examine ourselves whether we be in the faith. And it could just be that you're out of step with your fellowship with the Lord and you need to make that right. Then the next one I thought of was men. And of course with women, this I always caution ladies in this area, but especially married men, always remember that that's someone else's husband, and he is to be true to her and her to him. And so texting them, horsing around with them, and you may have phone numbers of men in your phone because maybe you work with them, maybe it's somebody from church, or maybe, but you have contact information for men, and sometimes it's married men. But texting them, horsing around with them, joking back and forth on Facebook or Messenger with him, that's all inappropriate. That should never happen. And I'm just warning you the dangers there. Making friends of them at work or at church, being too palsy with them, hugging them, touching them, that's someone else's husband. Those touches and things like that belong to his wife. So I can't caution you too much about this. I feel very strongly about this, I guess, because over the years of ministry, I've seen too much, and I know always where it starts. And so be careful about that. Remember that that's someone else's husband. Don't take selfie pictures with them. There is a area of inappropriateness there, and just be very, very careful. And it also puts you on dangerous territory, palling around with married men like this. It puts you on dangerous territory, and you can really get entangled there, and so can he. Don't let the devil use you that way. Another one would be laziness or self-will, and I think that one's self-explanatory. And we all battle laziness to an extent, don't we? We all have reasons why we choose to be lazy. Mondays are that for me. But if it's a struggle for you and it's something that you constantly struggle with, you can overcome that. You can. You just need to put down the thing that's creating the laziness. Maybe it's food. Maybe your diet's like off the hook and you're just eating things that aren't good for you, and it's destroying your health and making you feel like you don't really want to do anything. Maybe it's that you're wasting too much time on screen time or books or some kind of entertainment or sport or something. Put down the thing that's creating the laziness and just get up and do the first thing that needs to be done and create new good habits in your life. The next one I've already mentioned would be screens, and of any kind, and we have them in abundance in our life, don't we? There's the TV, there's laptops, tablets, phones. The list is endless, honestly, of screens that are in our life. And we like to keep a tight rein on those kind of things when it comes to our children, don't we? You're only allowed so many hours a day. I'm going to put all kind of parental controls on it, and we should. That's a good thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That is a good thing. But we forget to restrain our own flesh when it comes to screen time. And whenever I feel like I'm spending an abundance of time on a screen, I always check myself and make sure that I'm spending more time in God's Word than I am in front of a screen. Then there's social media, which kind of goes right along with screens, but man, that list is endless. And just a few right off the top of my head, because they're the big ones, are Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, but really I know there's a lot more than that. And if you battle with self-control, you might want to start here by deleting some accounts and instead using the time that you would spend on social media, using that time to spend in your Bible and in prayer. And you'll be amazed at the spiritual difference that you see in your life simply by replacing social media with time spent with the Lord. You'll see an amazing difference in your walk with the Lord. And the thing about it is, spending time with the Lord, that's something that's real. When you get on Facebook and Instagram, all these different social medias, probably 99% of the stuff that you see is not real. It's not. Can we say edit? Can we say filter? A lot of it's not. Very little of it is real. And then another one, and I say this carefully, but books. And I do read, honestly, I do. But when you think about books that have to do with marriage or the home or raising children, things like that, not everybody has their head screwed on straight when it comes to offering marriage advice and counseling about the home. There's some crackpots out there. There are, and I am not, knowledge did not live and die with me, but that's one area where I have to ask the Lord to help me to be careful, to have discretion, to read after the right people. You just have to be careful with the kind of books that you read when it comes to how to run your home. And I wish I had $1 for every time I've heard, well, so and so said in their book, and in my mind, and I'm not being a snob about it, I promise, but in my mind, I immediately think, I wonder if they know what the God of heaven says about it in his book. That's the first book I would read about the home or marriage or raising children. Or I'll hear, can you recommend any books about ... I sure can. The Bible. And I promise, I'm not being a snob. I really believe that. The Bible, it has the best wisdom concerning all the issues of life. If we'll just pick it up and read it. And like my husband preached on Sunday, if we'll read it and let it read us, and apply to our life what we hear and what we learn. Another one might be a job or a career. And I know this can be a big one, especially if you have a good work ethic. And I know a lot of people right now, especially ladies, are working part-time jobs to try to make ends meet, because let's face it, the price of everything is just skyrocketing. Gas, groceries, homeschool curriculum, just everything is like off the charts when it comes to price. Everything's doubled except for our income. And so I know this can be a sticky one. But a good work ethic is always noticed by the boss. And you should have a good work ethic as a believer. You should know how to work and be a good testimony. But that stuff gets noticed really quickly by your employer. And then what they do usually is they'll come to you and offer you, because you have a good work ethic, they'll come to you and offer you a promotion. And maybe it involves more pay, and that stuff can be tempting, but you have to always keep in the back of your mind, why am I doing this? I'm doing this to make ends meet. I'm not doing this to have a career. I have a husband, I have children, I have a home, I have my ministries. Be careful that the devil doesn't use that stuff, that promotion at work or whatever, to pull you away from the main thing. Always keep your focus right. Number 11 says, why is such self-control a requirement for teaching others? So, and I already mentioned this, because without self-control, you have no testimony, maybe little testimony. But our words become empty, and what we do speak so loudly that people can't hear what we're saying. Proverbs 25:28 says, he that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. That's a dangerous place to be. And if you have no self-control, then you have no protection from the enemy. He has free reign to just march in and take control of your life and cause all kinds of problems for you. And nobody wants to live in a city that's broken down, that has no protection. It's not a safe place to be. Have you ever driven through a city that's a ghost town? There's a lot of them here in the States. I think of places like Los Angeles. I've never been there, but I've seen YouTube videos and things like that. I think of places like Los Angeles, Detroit. There are parts of Detroit that are just absolute ghost towns. Nobody lives there. The buildings are boarded up. Places like Chicago, Gary, Indiana. We recently passed through there, and I thought, what in the world happened here? Houses are boarded up. Businesses are boarded up. This at one time was a booming city of industry. Everything's boarded up. But you think about, in Bible times, a city without walls meant that the enemy could just come in unhindered and defeat them. And so walls were for protection. And this reminds me of the first time we took a trip to Ireland. when our son and his family moved there to become missionaries in the country. And one of the first trips that we took through the countryside revealed miles and miles of very thick hedgerows. They were everywhere on the sides of the road. If you went out through the country, and if you had an opportunity to see, hills that went up, you could see the hedgerows just marked off borders and people's property. It wasn't fences, it was hedgerows. And they were so thick that a person or an animal couldn't climb through. And you can't even, a lot of the country roads, and this annoys me when we go over there because it's such a beautiful country, but a lot of the country roads, when you drive down them, the hedgerows are so thick and so high that you can't even see. All you're seeing is hedgerows on both sides of the road. You can't see out to the countryside. But they're very high, and every time we visit and I see those hedges, it reminds me to keep the hedges high in my own life so that the enemy can't break through and wreak havoc in my life. And God puts his hedge of protection around our lives, doesn't he? But we can do things that cause little breaks to appear in that hedge and little holes through which the enemy of our souls can come in by his cunning craftiness. And how can we break those hedges? Well, here's a few ways. You can break a hedge by wrong, ungodly attitudes. And we know that. And it's easy, like I said, in other ways to point things out in other people's lives, but it's hard to see them in our own life. But if you want those hedges to stay high and strong and not broken down, we need to keep a check on our attitude, because that's one way he can break through and cause problems. Another way we can break the hedge is by having sinful thoughts and ways. And I think it's Philippians 4:8 that gives you the whole list of things that you should be thinking about, and that'll help you control your thoughts. And then there's the verse that talks about casting down imaginations and bringing them into captivity, changing your thought patterns so that they're not sinful. You can break a hedge by having unforgiveness, because unforgiveness always turns to bitterness. You can break a hedge by backsliding. My husband just preached on some of the steps of backsliding on Sunday. You can break a hedge through disobedience to the will of God. Clearly he's communicated to you what he wants you to do, and you put the brakes on and think, no, I have a better way. I don't really want to do that. I'm not interested. But we just need to remember to keep those hedges high, ladies. Keep them high. Don't leave room for the enemy to come in. 1 Timothy 4:12 says, "But be thou an example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity." So we're also instructed to be an example of the believers in every way, remembering that others are always watching. And, it does help me to want to do right and walk right, knowing that others are watching, but even more so just that the eyes of the Lord are in every place and he sees me, he watches. But yes, also that others are watching too. Remember that others are always watching. For instance, if you have a history of lying, others might find it difficult to give credence to anything that you say to them, because they think, well, I've caught her in some lies before, so I don't know if I can believe this, what she's telling me. Or maybe you have a history of dealing with things in anger. I hope not. People will begin to refrain from coming to you or talking to you about anything, which is the total opposite of our instruction to be easy, that we're to be easy to be entreated. So we need to exercise self-control in every area of our life. If you intend to be any kind of an example, a teacher, a witness, anything like that, you need to have self-control. Number 12 says, explain how some things which are good in themselves can be bad by misuse. And so we have a few verses to read here. First one is Proverbs 24:13, then 25:16 and 27. So I'll read those. And Proverbs 24:13 says, "My son, eat thou honey because it is good," and it is, "and the honeycomb, which is sweet to thy taste." And then 25:16 says, "Hast thou found honey? Eat so much as is sufficient for thee, lest thou be filled therewith and vomit it." And then 25:27, "It is not good to eat much honey, so for men to search their own glory is not glory." So here's just a couple of examples, about what can happen when we have too much of a good thing, or use a good thing a wrong way, or whatever. We need to really be careful, and with all pleasure. And so I look at honey and I think, well, honey is something that's good. It's sweet to the taste. It's something that we enjoy. It's a pleasure, right? And so what kind of pleasures are in our life that if we don't keep a check on them, they can get out of control. Any kind of pleasure in our life can lose its sweetness by excessive use. And it can make us nauseous, just like too much honey, just like what it says, that too much honey can make us literally vomit. It can turn sour in our stomach and make us sick. And the same thing happens with too much pleasure, things that get out of check in our life. And so a few examples of good things that can be bad by misuse. And I asked some of the ladies in my church, because I wasn't hearing back from anybody. I'm like, all right, ladies, give me some things, that that the Lord told you that are good things that can be bad by misuse. And I'll read those in just a minute. But a few that I thought of right off the top of my head, first of all, was any form of entertainment. I even asked my husband about this. What are your thoughts on this, But movies, Facebook, Instagram, we've already talked about all this. Movies, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube videos, online games, traveling, eating out, hiking, shooting, boating, biking, motorcycling, just think of anything that's an entertainment that you enjoy in your life. We have a constant need for entertainment, don't we? And it's not wrong. I mean, it's not wrong to enjoy some things. I enjoy live theater. I love going to a dinner theater, having a wonderful meal and seeing a live play. I enjoy that kind of thing. I know some people that enjoy live concerts, like outside on the lawn or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. My husband rides a motorcycle. I enjoy riding with him, even though we haven't done it in years. But there are lots of things that I enjoy that entertain me. But we need to be careful, and we need to be mindful of the number of hours that we spend on that entertainment, because it can easily replace the needed time with the Lord. And so I don't ever want to have the mantra, it's all about balance, it's all about balance, but it is all about balance. But we just need to be mindful of the number of hours that we spend on entertainment. Any form of sports, and sports can be fun and they can be healthy for us. Honestly, they can keep us physically fit, which is needful if we want to be a servant for the Lord, to be physically fit. But if we become obsessed with it and let it take the place of the Lord, let it take the place, let practices take the place of church services or ministries, then the same reasons that I just read a minute ago apply here as well. And it becomes an idol in our life and needs to be broken down. Another one that I thought of is food and exercise. They're both good. They're very needful in our lives, food and exercise. But here's another area that if we're not careful, we just get absolutely consumed and obsessed by it. It's all we talk about, Have you noticed in the last 10 or 20 years the obsession with food? My soul, it's incredible. And I jumped on the bandwagon back in the 90s when the Food Network made its debut on TV. I was a diehard Paula Deen fan. Everything that she made, I wanted to make. I subscribed to her magazines, I printed her recipes. I still have folders full of her recipes. And to this day, some of my best recipes that I've ever made were from Paula Deen. And I even started my own cooking blog. It was a thing in the 90s. Cooking and food, it just exploded everywhere. And then I gained 40 pounds. And then I realized my husband had diabetes. And all of a sudden, food was a bad thing in my life that I had to retrain my thinking about. And I had to exercise self-control. So food and exercise can be good, but we need to keep them in check. Another one that I thought of was medicine, especially if it's a controlled substance, maybe for a past injury or something like that. But years ago, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and this was like back before it was understood really what it is, and I still don't think doctors fully understand what it is. But I had a doctor friend, and I asked him about, what my doctor had told me, and he said, Starr, it's a wastebasket diagnosis. When he told you had fibromyalgia, he's telling you he doesn't understand why you have pain, and so they gave it that label. And he said, your doctor doesn't know what your pain is being caused from. And so I ended up on a pain med called Elavil. And I had done some research in past years, but for some reason, I just took my doctor's word for the fact that this Elavil was supposed to help with my fibromyalgia pain. Didn't do a whole lot of research about it, and I regret that. But after a few weeks of being on this pain med, I began to cry at the drop of a hat. I became very emotional, very unlike me. I became depressed. I would often cry myself to sleep. I became very negative and critical of people. The way people looked at me, the things people said, everything. I found fault with everything. which is very unlike me. And I'm not saying I'm perfect and I'm always a glass half full, but for the most part, that's my mentality. Is I'm usually pretty positive. Um, but I had no idea what was wrong with me, and I just felt like my life was spinning out of control, and I didn't understand why. So I remember waking up one morning and just dreading the light of day, and having to climb out of bed. And I turned over and I saw this bottle of pills sitting on the table beside the bed, and all of a sudden it hit me. I wonder if it's the only new thing in my life is that med. I wonder if it's that med that's causing me to feel like this. And so I did a little research on the med and discovered it wasn't a pain pill at all, but it was an antidepressant. And so I flushed that med and never took another med for fibro ever. I've never ever taken another prescription med for fibromyalgia pain. Instead, I dove into research on natural health and how to control the effects of fibro through diet. And that's how I have done it. And prescription meds can be a good thing that turn bad very quickly. How many of us have known people that had a back injury or a work injury or something like that, and they got put on a controlled substance and got hooked? I think we probably all do. But always do your research. I'm not a doctor. Don't pretend to be. I'm not a naturopath or anything like that. I just know what worked for me. And you may have to take meds for fibro, and if you do, I'm very sorry. I know fibro can be very, very hard to deal with, but I also know that if you give in to it, it's worse. And so, anything like that is between you and your doctor. But for me, my body just does not handle synthetic prescription meds well at all. And so I always try to go the natural route with anything like that. Another area that I thought about was work, spending all of your extra hours on overtime, just for more money. Another one is family. And you think, family, how could family be a good thing that's used in a bad way? But it can. Family can be you sacrifice time with the Lord, you sacrifice your personal time with Him, worship time, ministries, to spend it with family. Maybe it's with your spouse or your children or extended family that's come in for a visitor, or else you sacrifice time with your children to spend it with your husband, or you sacrifice time with your husband to spend it with your children. It's all about balance, is what people say, but mostly what I've seen when people say this is that they really want to spend less time doing things for the Lord and more time doing things for self. And so your family is a wonderful blessing from the Lord. Don't misuse them. Yes, have balance. Don't misuse your family. And then ministries are a good thing that can be done a bad way. Serving the Lord, because you end up sacrificing your family to be a servant of the Lord. And don't misunderstand me when I say this. If you have God in His right place, everything works beautifully. It does. It can. It's happened in our lives. But if you end up sacrificing your family to serve the Lord, your children are going to grow up bitter towards the things of the Lord, and it doesn't have to be that way. If you do things biblically, like I said, it will work properly. And when your children are growing up, just include them in everything that you can. Everything that you're doing, include your children. If you're cleaning the church, take them with you. If you're working on a bus, take them with you. If you're going out door knocking, take them with you. And that's what we did, and it worked for us. And that's part of training them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And now I asked some of the ladies in my Bible study to share their answers of some of these. And here's some of the answers that I got. One of them was ice cream. She ain't wrong. Ice cream's a good thing that can become bad by misuse. Pinterest, oh my goodness. I don't even know how many boards I have on Pinterest or how many pins I have. It's in the thousands. And when I weigh out how many pins I have actually done, and then of the ones I've actually done that were fails, sometimes I think, do these people really know how to cook? This was not a good recipe. So Pinterest is a big one. Cell phones was another one, which we mentioned. Books, music, hobbies, the internet, and Google searches. It's a good tool, but if you're not careful, boy, it can take you down a wrong path. And God doesn't want our life to be a drudgery, never enjoying anything fun or relaxing. That's not what He wants for us. He tells us to come apart and rest a while. He wants us to have things that we enjoy. We just need to be mindful to keep him in his rightful place in our life, and that's first. And it's a process, right? It's day in and day out, crucifying our sinful flesh, getting it under control, and learning to walk in the Spirit so that we won't fulfill the lusts of the flesh. And so walking in the Spirit, it's just so important. And that's the thing that will help us to have the self-control that we need, because walking in the Spirit will help you not to get into the flesh where you're out of control about things. So, and I think this is a quote my husband told me in the car when we were driving down the road. I'm pretty sure he said, "Don't let your good replace what's best." And so I'll just leave that with you. Lots of areas in our life where we need to exercise self-control. And I'm really thankful for this story of Esther and the example of self-control that we can learn from her life. And I'll just share this with you, and then I'll go because our time is up. But I was teaching my Sunday school class on Sunday, and I've been teaching through the Judges, and I'm on Gideon right now. And I have read through the story of Gideon dozens of times, but it just hit me, how human Gideon was, first of all, that his flesh feared, and also that the fact that, and I don't think Gideon was puffed up with pride, but when God kept reducing his army and finally got them down to just 300 men, I'm sure Gideon had some fear, because if you remember when God told him to go down into the Midianite camp and to listen what they were saying in their tents, he said, "If you're afraid, you can take your servant Phurah," I think his name was, "take him with you." So God knew Gideon had some fear, and then it also struck me that battle took place at night, and what a victory they had. And I thought, in our life, when we're in a struggle or a trial and it seems so dark and we can't see the light of day, we don't even know what's happening. In the dark, God can be fighting the greatest battles, and we could be having the biggest victories of our life in the dark, when it feels the darkest, when we can't see. And you think about when Gideon and his men were blowing the trumpets and breaking the pitchers and all that and screaming, when the Midianites were panic stricken and running around just killing each other because they didn't know what was going on. You think, boy, that's a weird battle plan, but you just don't know how God is working and what he can use in your life to help you get the victory over that trial that you're going through, even though it seems so dark. And I don't know, maybe I'm just not remembering, but I don't know that I've read about very many battles that took place at night, or maybe it just didn't mention what time of day that they took place, but that it struck me that was a battle that took place in the middle of the night when things were dark and you can't really see what's going on. But God was doing his biggest work in the dark, and man, what a victory that they had. And I just want to share that with you, that spoke to my heart, when I was teaching the girls. And I teach 5th and 6th grade, and so I told them, I'm standing up here teaching you girls, and the whole time I'm teaching you girls, the Lord is teaching your teacher teaching me some things, reminding me about some things. So I just wanted to share that with you before we close today. Thank you so much for joining me today. That's all the time we have. Take time to introduce yourself. Please leave a comment. And if you know somebody that would benefit from the Bible study, feel free to share the links. It would be wonderful. That's all the time we have for today. Hope you have a wonderful day. Look for somebody to be a blessing to, and look for someone to give the gospel to. I love you all, and I'll see you next week.